When Marcus Bennett was preparing to divorce me for his younger colleague, he got into a devastating car accident and slipped into a coma. His spirit remained tethered to my side, though I carefully pretended not to notice his presence. The doctors said he might never regain consciousness. His colleague immediately distanced herself from him and within weeks announced her new romance with someone else. Later, when Marcus finally awakened, she came rushing back with tears streaming down her face. She sobbed under Marcus's steady gaze, saying, "Marcus, I've waited so long for you to wake up." Standing there, watching Marcus lying motionless in the ICU surrounded by tubes and monitors, I felt a bitter sense of vindication rising in my heart. This is what happens to someone who betrayed genuine love, I thought. The doctor had explained that his traumatic brain injury was severe, with less than a 5% chance of waking up. When his beloved colleague Emma Hayes heard the prognosis, she came to the hospital, cast him a disgusted look, and coldly muttered, "Hope you get better soon." She never returned after that visit. She probably chose to forget that Marcus had the accident because of her. 6 months earlier, just one day before Marcus was scheduled to finalize our divorce, Emma mentioned she was craving some special soup from that old bistro on the south side of town. Despite the terrible thunderstorm raging that evening, Marcus went out to get it for her without a second thought. On his journey back with the steaming soup, he got caught in a massive multi-car collision. When I arrived at the hospital after receiving the emergency call, I was handed one critical condition notice after another. Nobody could understand the complicated emotions I felt at that moment, darkly wishing he would just die, while simultaneously thinking that death would be far too merciful for him. I didn't know what outcome I truly wanted. I just wanted him to experience every bit of the pain I had endured. But now he lay in the hospital in a vegetative state. And Emma, the woman he loved most, had completely abandoned him. I once encountered Emma at a restaurant and kindly suggested to her. The doctor mentioned that if someone important to him would stay by his side and speak to him regularly, he might have a better chance of regaining consciousness. She smiled dismissively and said, "What does that have to do with me? Why should I waste my prime years on a vegetative person who has nothing to do with me? Claire, you're his wife. You should be the one staying with him. Nothing to do with her." I silently repeated those words, finding them extraordinarily ironic. She didn't say, "Nothing to do with her," when she made Marcus leave me with a raging 104-degree fever to attend her birthday celebration. She didn't say, "Nothing to do with her," when she needed Marcus to divorce me so they could be together. But now when Marcus needs her care after becoming comatose because of her, suddenly it's nothing to do with her. I looked at her steadily and said, "Emma, don't forget he ended up like this because he went to fetch that soup for you." She became defensive and angry, snapping back, "Did I hold a gun to his head and force him to go? He chose to do it himself, and it's just unfortunate that he had an accident and became a vegetable. Don't try to pin the blame on me." I remained silent, watching her hurriedly leave as if escaping contamination. She's right, I thought. Of course Emma wouldn't want to wait around for someone who might never wake up. I tilted my head slightly, my gaze seemingly casually falling on the spirit that had been following me for so long. The look of disbelief on his face, the deeply furrowed brow. He must be feeling absolutely terrible right now. Marcus had no idea that I could see him. It happened during the second week following the car accident. I had dozed off while working in my study, and the cool night breeze from the open window jolted me awake. Through my blurry vision, I saw Marcus casually leaning against the wooden bookshelf filled with volumes. The white curtains occasionally drifted through his translucent form. My drowsiness vanished instantly. I remained frozen, maintaining my position of lying on the desk with half-opened eyes for a considerable while before calling the hospital. The response was calm. "Mr. Bennett's condition is stable today with no deterioration, but there are no indications of him waking up." After calmly hanging up the phone, I blinked and realized his entire body was slightly transparent, almost ethereal. So I stood up, my feet sinking into the plush carpet, and slowly walked to where he stood, pretending not to see him at all. I reached through his ghostly body to retrieve a book of poetry from the second shelf. In those few steps back to my chair with the book in hand, my emotions underwent a dramatic transformation, from terror to surprise to eventual acceptance. Marcus's soul had separated from his physical body and was trapped near me. Moreover, I could hear his voice, because when I picked up the divorce papers his lawyer had carefully prepared, I heard him sneer bitterly, "Claire Adams, you must be absolutely delighted now. I'm in a coma and can't divorce you, exactly what you wanted, isn't it?" He said it was what I wanted. He thought my persistence in holding on to our marriage until finally agreeing to divorce was due to reluctance and desperation, but the truth was I had genuinely decided to let him go. Was I happy? No. And I wanted him to be miserable too. So I let him hear firsthand how Emma distanced herself from him. The soft footsteps of a nurse echoed from the end of the sterile corridor. As I silently walked into the ICU and approached his bed, I had to admit that even in just a hospital gown with disheveled hair and a sickly pale complexion as he lay there, Marcus was still remarkably handsome. His thick, curved eyelashes cast shadows beneath his eyelids. His straight nose sat above perfectly shaped thin lips, and his smooth facial features had become more defined due to the coma, making his appearance even more striking and refined. But my feelings for Marcus, my decision to be with him, were never about his looks. After all, I understood well enough that the most beautiful things could be the most treacherous. So when we first met as best man and bridesmaid at the same wedding ceremony, I immediately categorized him as dangerous. Besides politely offering him a tissue when someone accidentally spilled wine on him, I had minimal interaction with him. But fate has its own way of being unstoppable. We soon met again under unexpected circumstances. I happened to help an elderly woman who had collapsed during my evening jog in the park. She turned out to be Marcus's grandmother. From Marcus taking me to dinner as a gesture of gratitude, our meetings became increasingly frequent. Getting caught in the rain outside my internship building, I'd coincidentally encounter Marcus passing by, who would then offer me a ride home. A holiday gathering my friend dragged me to turned out to be Marcus's birthday party where he wished for peace and happiness while blowing out his candles. As the coincidences accumulated, I sensed something was off. So I began deliberately avoiding him. But Marcus not only didn't mind my distance, he pursued me even more intensely until I was backed into a corner and anxiously asked what he wanted. Only then did he smile, his eyes twinkling as he asked gently, "Miss Adams, I'm courting you. Haven't you noticed?" I never understood why Marcus would develop feelings for me. But after that confession, he stopped hiding his intentions and began pursuing me with determination. I tried to resist his advances, desperately guarding my heart. At that time, Marcus was handsome, mature, witty, successful in his career, and showed such genuine tenderness, the kind where his attention was focused solely on you. To be honest, as someone who had just graduated from university and entered the workforce, it was almost impossible to remain indifferent. Falling for him felt inevitable. The turning point came on Valentine's Day evening. I had drunk too much while trying to secure an important business deal, but the client wouldn't relent. He pressed his wine glass suggestively against my chest and smirked, "Ah, to be young. Miss Adams, do you have a boyfriend?" Before I could react through my nausea and discomfort, the private room's door burst open violently. Marcus stormed in with a thunderous expression, grabbed the man's wrist forcefully, and made him drop the glass. His voice was ice cold as he declared, "She does now." It wasn't until Marcus pulled me out onto the street that his words finally registered in my foggy mind. After turning it over in my thoughts, I finally asked about the situation inside. "Someone will handle it. Don't worry," he assured me confidently. I nodded, guessing that one of my colleagues, impressed by Marcus's obvious status and authority, had tipped him off about the uncomfortable situation. In the romantic glow of the streetlights, Marcus draped his jacket over my shoulders, making no mention of the unpleasant scene we'd left behind. Such incidents were commonplace in the professional world. When you lack the power to fight back, you can only endure it silently, perhaps cry it out later at home in privacy. I'd grown accustomed to such indignities. But then Marcus stepped in front of me with absolute authority, giving me my first taste of what it felt like to be genuinely protected. When you're vulnerable, comfort becomes the most dangerous thing. Couples passed by on the street, breaking my contemplative silence. With the same casual tone one might use to suggest dinner, Marcus asked, "Miss Adams, would you like to spend Valentine's Day together?" Even now, I can still vividly remember the trembling sensation of hope taking root in my heart. I looked into his earnest eyes and decided he was the one. So I pointed to a small cart selling roses by the roadside and asked softly, "Could I have one rose?" He paused for a moment, then suddenly smiled broadly. He turned and bought the entire cart of roses, coming back to tell me warmly, "Now they're all yours, and there will always be more." I was so naive and foolish then, believing that always meant forever. Until Emma returned. Only then did I realize that always had an expiration date. The moment she appeared, everything changed. After Emma arrived, all promises and vows became nothing but a cruel joke. I'd seen countless online discussions about how powerful an unattainable ideal can be, but 1,000 detailed answers couldn't compare to one look Marcus gave Emma. It was such a cliché story. Emma was Marcus's unreachable crush. After she chose another man and moved abroad, Marcus never stopped pining for her. I was just a placeholder in his life, a temporary substitute. Marcus had only one family member, his grandmother. When she collapsed due to advanced stomach cancer, her only remaining concern was seeing Marcus settle down and get married. I was simply the tool Marcus chose to ease her worried mind. But Marcus's grandmother genuinely liked me and was always incredibly kind to me. The love I felt from Marcus turned out to be an illusion. But the familial affection his grandmother gave me was authentic and real. She would bake my favorite osmanthus cake, prepare clothes for me ahead of each season, and always take my side without hesitation whenever Marcus and I had disagreements. She would even tap Marcus with her walking stick, saying, "What wrong could Claire possibly have done? If anyone's at fault, it's you, you silly boy." Even on her deathbed, she said to me, "Marrying this foolish boy has brought you nothing but hardship, Claire, dear. As long as you two are happy together, I can rest in peace." At that emotional moment, Marcus held my hand tightly with tears streaming down his eyes and promised, "We will be. I promise we will." Then 8 months after his grandmother passed away peacefully, he reunited with Emma at a party after she returned from her breakup abroad. I first noticed something was profoundly wrong because of a small incident. During dinner one evening, I mentioned to him that there had been a sudden downpour earlier that day, followed by a magnificent double rainbow. Everyone was posting photos of it on social media, saying that double rainbows were a sign of good fortune and blessings. I asked if he had seen it. He didn't answer because his mind was clearly elsewhere. A few seconds later, he noticed I had stopped eating and was quietly observing him. He smiled gently and asked, "Claire, what were you saying?" I said it wasn't important. Back in school, whenever I encountered multiple choice questions I wasn't certain about, I could always guess the correct answer through intuition and gut feeling. I never imagined that one day I would need to use the skill I was once proud of on Marcus. Almost instinctively, I guessed that during those few seconds when Marcus's mind wandered away, he was thinking about a woman. I wasn't wrong. It was Emma Hayes. She was 3 years behind Marcus at university. Back then, before Marcus had achieved his current level of success, his looks alone weren't enough to compete with her other wealthy and handsome suitor who also fancied her. So unsurprisingly, he lost that competition. But he probably never expected that Emma would return after her breakup, and that by then he would be successful in his career. It seemed like perfect timing, as if their previous separation was merely setting the stage for them to meet again when they were both at their best. I don't know how deeply Marcus loved Emma. For her to successfully draw him away from me time and time again, completely disregarding his status as a married man. Her casual statement about wanting to be with Marcus was enough to destroy my marriage, to destroy me entirely. From initial suspicion to confrontation and finally to desperate pleading and hysteria, Marcus pushed me away in disgust, saying coldly, "Claire, you're being absolutely revolting right now." That night, I stood on the balcony until dawn broke. My tears were dried by the wind countless times until I realized something profound. Marcus was right. I was disgusted with myself too. So I gave up the fight. When Marcus brought up divorce again, I asked him directly, "In these 4 years together, was there ever a single moment when you truly loved me?" He impatiently avoided my gaze and said flatly, "No." I remained silent for a few seconds, then calmly agreed to the divorce. He seemed somewhat surprised and looked at me suspiciously, asking, "What's your trick this time?" Indeed, several times before, I had used excuses like sudden illness or car trouble to delay the proceedings. But this one time I was finally genuinely ready to divorce him. He ended up in a coma after getting into a car accident while rushing to Emma. Then he discovered that Emma not only abandoned him without hesitation but also quickly reconciled with her ex-boyfriend. I heard that when Emma broke up with her wealthy boyfriend, it was because he was having an ambiguous relationship with his first love. After several explosive arguments about this ongoing issue, they finally split up dramatically. Men's inherent flaw is that they can't forget what they can't have and deeply regret losing what they've already lost. So when Emma got in touch with Marcus after returning, appearing at the same social occasions repeatedly and getting closer to him step by calculated step, her wealthy ex-boyfriend also came back to pursue her again. It's hard to say whether Emma's interactions with Marcus had anything to do with deliberately provoking her ex-boyfriend's jealousy. After all, Marcus used to be his biggest romantic rival. During the time when Marcus was actively planning to divorce me for Emma, her ex-boyfriend was at his most desperate trying to win her back, doing many romantic yet extreme things, apology messages via drones, proposing in an elaborate sea of flowers, self-harm when intoxicated. Emma watched it all quietly, continued being with Marcus, and then shortly after his car accident and coma, when her ex-boyfriend once again made a grand gesture with an expensive billboard confession, she agreed to get back together with him. No one knew what exact role Marcus played between them in this complicated triangle. But her ex-boyfriend did visit Marcus in the hospital once, saying with obvious relief, "Though it might be wrong to think this way, I'm genuinely grateful for that night's accident. Marcus, I won again this time." Marcus was standing right behind him then, glaring darkly with rage, but could do absolutely nothing in his ghost-like state. From hearing Emma deny their relationship to witnessing her reconcile with her ex, Marcus went from disbelief to fury and finally had to accept it all helplessly. I calmly and pleasantly savored every bit of his pain, watching him quietly following behind me, finding it quite ironic. He once wanted so desperately to cut ties with me, so desperately to never see me again, yet ultimately was forced to be with me every single day. Just like when we first started dating, we shared everything we did with each other unreservedly, letting each other know our whereabouts. Now he had to follow me to work, social gatherings, shopping trips, and even my carefully planned travels. As time went by, I started hearing his resentful complaints echoing around me. "I'm in a coma and you still have the heart to go traveling. Do you have any heart at all? Don't you care whether I live or die? Claire, has my long coma made you forget you're married? Stay away from that man." The man he mentioned was my intern, Daniel Cooper. Among all my interns, he was the only one who called me Claire directly instead of Ms. Adams like the others. He was also the most outstanding one in terms of ability and performance. I actually didn't mind how they addressed me personally. And besides, Daniel's deep and clear voice made calling me Claire sound completely inoffensive. But Marcus didn't see it that way at all. Whenever Daniel appeared near me, he would show a side I'd never seen before, shouting furiously in his ghostly state, "Claire, are you blind? Can't you see his intentions aren't pure?" Hearing this, I would look up at Daniel, who was clean-cut, well-mannered, and always properly buttoned up in his crisp shirt, and couldn't understand Marcus's anxiety. "What are you so anxious about, Marcus?" Of course, I'm not a naive little girl anymore, and I'm not blind either. I can clearly see what Daniel is thinking and feeling. He likes me. Daniel has the kind of boyish good looks that many young women fancy these days, but his personality contrasts sharply with his youthful appearance. He's calm, controlled, rational, and measured in everything he does. Since I've known him, I've rarely seen him lose his composure or emotional control. Even when a colleague accidentally deleted his hard work data files, he calmly finished his breakfast before methodically choosing the quickest way to recover it or simply redoing it from scratch. After solving the problem efficiently, he would say to his apologetic and worried colleague, "It's fine now. Just be more careful next time." The only time I saw genuine panic on his face was when we went to discuss an important collaboration project. After it ended successfully, he went to get the car while I rested in the private room for a while before going to find him. On my way through the hallway, a drunk man suddenly dragged me into another room, attempting to take advantage of me while intoxicated and slurring his words. Honestly, if this had happened right after graduation, would have been terrified and struggled while screaming frantically. But I'm not that person anymore. So I waited for the right moment carefully, and when he touched me inappropriately, I grabbed a nearby bottle and smashed it hard against his head with all my strength. Then I called the manager, the police, and had them check the CCTV footage meticulously. When Daniel found me, his usually pristine shirt was unusually dusty and disheveled, though he hadn't even noticed. He just stared at my bleeding hand cut by the broken glass, breathing erratically as he apologized repeatedly, "I'm sorry I was late." I gave him a slight reassuring smile and said, "Not late at all, just in time." Later, after he bought medicine and bandaged my wound carefully while driving me home, I looked out the window at the passing scenery and said casually, "Daniel, I'm married." He showed no surprise at all, keeping his eyes steadily on the road as he replied, "Yes, I know, but I heard you're getting divorced." These two exchanges were the only time we'd ever discussed personal matters since we'd known each other professionally. Everything said was factual and nothing was inappropriate or crossing boundaries. That's why Marcus's intense anger puzzled me so much. I hadn't done anything wrong, and he clearly didn't love me, so why was he so angry? But it didn't matter because none of his emotions, including him as a person, would affect me anymore at this point. I continued maintaining a normal, professional working relationship with Daniel until today during the company team-building hike. I slipped on some wet steps on a slope and Daniel quickly grabbed me, pulling me protectively into his arms as we rolled down together. I was fine, just a slight scrape on my cheek from a branch, but Daniel, in protecting me instinctively, had suffered various impact injuries to his arms and legs. I followed the ambulance to the hospital, anxiously waiting for his examination results outside the room. Just as the doctor said he was fine and only needed rest at home with some medication, I received an unexpected call from Marcus's primary physician. It was then I suddenly realized that Marcus, who had been following behind me, calling out, "Claire," in panic when Daniel and I rolled down the slope, had completely disappeared. At the same moment, the doctor's voice came through the phone clearly. "During our examination, we found that Mr. Bennett's condition is improving significantly, and he's showing signs of waking up." I stood there for a while after hanging up, processing this information. Then I went to the ICU and stood in front of the still sleeping Marcus, smirking slightly, "Less than 5% chance, and you're still going to wake up." I didn't know if Marcus would truly wake up, but half a month after I left the hospital that day, I heard another piece of unexpected news. Emma had broken up again with her boyfriend. Long ago, I once saw a perceptive comment online, "Cheating happens either 0 times or countless times." So it wasn't particularly surprising when her wealthy boyfriend broke up with her shortly after their reconciliation, having gotten entangled with some unknown social media influencer. What truly surprised me was how Emma, abandoning her former image of a graceful, aloof ice queen who would leave relationships with dignity, was now causing a dramatic scene in the massive shopping center, cursing and begging shamelessly without any regard for her carefully crafted image. Watching that scene unfold from afar, it felt strangely familiar. That was who I used to be back then when I desperately clung to Marcus, refusing to let go of our dying relationship. I was just like that, like a mad woman who had completely lost her mind and dignity. The most memorable incident was on my birthday when I found him at a cafe with Emma, chatting intimately despite him telling me he had a business trip out of town. At that moment, it felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over me while my heart burned as if being roasted over open flames. I rushed over and swept everything off their table without thinking or caring about the consequences. Marcus stood up immediately and shouted at me harshly, "Claire Adams, have you gone mad?" Emma smiled elegantly and looked at Marcus with false innocence, saying, "How did you end up marrying someone like her?" Having lost all reason and control, I slapped her hard across the face. "Would you rather he married a homewrecker like you?" I shouted back. Then Marcus, without hesitation, slapped me back with equal force. I tasted blood in my mouth, the metallic tang bitter and humiliating. That night he brought up divorce for the first time, saying coldly, "Claire, let's get divorced." I truly loved Marcus back then with everything I had. Even when reason told me to let go and move on, emotionally I couldn't accept it, couldn't bear to leave, and didn't want them to be happy together without consequences. In the end, I only hurt myself deeply and thoroughly. Now Emma was tasting the same pain I had experienced so intimately. As for why she could walk away easily after her last breakup but made such drastically different choices this time, I couldn't help but wonder if it was because her backup plan, her confidence, her tool for making her wealthy boyfriend jealous, Marcus, was in a coma and unavailable. As the drama continued and I was about to look away while stirring my coffee absently, I caught a glimpse of a faint, translucent figure in the corner of the crowd, calmly watching Emma's meltdown with an unreadable expression. It was Marcus's spirit. After many days of absence, his spirit had appeared again. This time, however, he wasn't trapped directly by my side. But he couldn't come near me either. 3 meters, that was as close as he could physically get to me. I thought he wouldn't follow me anymore once he gained his freedom from being constantly tethered to my immediate vicinity. But every morning when I left for work, I would see him standing quietly by a ginkgo tree near the estate entrance. The moment he saw me approaching, he would instinctively walk towards me, only to be pulled back sharply to his original spot by some invisible supernatural force. Every single time he would walk towards me, every single time he would be pulled back forcefully. I wondered if spirits like him, wandering in this world between life and death, ever hoped desperately that someone could see them, acknowledge their existence. One evening, as I came out of the pastry shop carrying a small box, I smiled knowingly and looked directly in his direction. After a brief pause of surprise, he seemed excited and moved his lips, apparently mouthing my name, Claire. Then, carrying my beautifully packaged small cake carefully, I walked forward step by step, watching as he was forced to step backward until I stopped at his previous position. He saw Daniel walking towards me, passing right through his ethereal form without any awareness. Since that accident on the hike, Daniel had been recovering at home. During his recovery period, I visited him once with flowers and fruits and covered all his medical expenses generously, including the cost of hiring a private nurse to assist him. He didn't refuse my help or assistance. When I asked if he needed anything else, he looked into my eyes steadily and said, "It's my birthday in a month." Now that he's recovered, and it happens to be his birthday today, I'm carrying this cake to fulfill my promise of celebrating with him. As Daniel led me towards the parking area, Marcus seemed to realize exactly what we were about to do. Through the crowd of people passing by obliviously, he shouted desperately, "Claire, don't you dare go. Come back, Claire, come back." Without any hesitation, I got into the car smoothly. Looking at Marcus's furious expression in the rearview mirror, I recalled a small incident from years ago. Shortly after Marcus and I got together, I switched to a different company for better opportunities. One night when I had to work late on an urgent project, I told Marcus not to bother picking me up. After work, a colleague kindly offered to give me a lift home. Just as I got into their car and fastened my seatbelt, Marcus called. His voice came through the phone, tinged with a gentle smile, both resigned and affectionate. "Claire, I've been waiting downstairs for 3 hours. Are you really going to leave me here?" Startled, I caught sight of Marcus's reflection in the rearview mirror, standing by his car. I immediately got out of my colleague's car and ran to him, throwing myself into his warm arms, asking breathlessly, "Why didn't you call earlier? Why wait here alone in the cold?" He fondly ruffled my hair and said with a smile, "Well, I didn't want to disturb my dear girlfriend while she was working so hard." Coming back to the present moment, Marcus's figure in the rearview mirror grew smaller and smaller until it became just a tiny speck in the distance. Daniel asked me curiously, "What are you looking at?" I replied jokingly, "Just watching a comedy unfold." 15 minutes later, we arrived at the reserved restaurant. Although it was his birthday celebration, Daniel thoughtfully ordered dishes according to my taste preferences. I discreetly shifted my attention to the cake box, opening it carefully to release a sweet orange scent that filled the air. After lighting the candles with a match, I held up the cake and cheerfully wished him, "Happy birthday, Daniel. Make a wish." The restaurant's unique lighting was soft and dim, and through the flickering candlelight, his face wasn't entirely clear, but I knew he was looking at me intently before closing his eyes to make his wish silently. "I hope I won't be late again." I couldn't help but laugh softly, putting down the cake and raising my wine glass to him in a toast. Then I wish your wish comes true. Later, slightly tipsy from the wine, we walked along the riverside promenade. The river reflected the brilliant city lights beautifully, and after watching quietly for a while, I sighed and brought up personal matters with Daniel for the second time. I told him frankly, Daniel, although I'm getting divorced, you know he's in a coma after the car accident. The evening breeze gently moved his fringe as he casually rested his arm on the riverside railing, turning his head to look at me, speaking bluntly and without hesitation, divorce or widowhood, there will be an outcome either way. It was just as he said those words that I surprisingly spotted Marcus's ghostly figure not far away, partially hidden in shadow. I wondered if the evening breeze had carried those harsh words to his ears. From the corner of my eye, I saw him silently watching me, then giving what seemed like a self-mocking smile before his figure slowly disappeared into the wind like mist. 3 days later, I got that outcome everyone had been waiting for. Marcus woke up. Emma arrived at the hospital before I did, somehow learning the news. In the cold, quiet hospital room, she was crying with teary eyes under Marcus's calm, almost cold gaze. I've waited so long for you, Marcus. You're finally awake. I didn't know how she learned about Marcus regaining consciousness so quickly. Nor did I care about her emotional display of grievance and false devotion. My eyes met Marcus's, which had been fixed intently on me since I entered the sterile room. I turned to the doctor standing nearby professionally and asked directly, when can he be discharged? The doctor carefully explained, Mr. Bennett has just woken up. He needs to stay for observation and rehabilitation for at least several weeks. If there's anything urgent, I smiled politely and interrupted, nothing urgent, just need to get a divorce. As soon as I finished speaking, I heard a sharp crash. Marcus had knocked the water glass from Emma's hand violently. Under her incredulous gaze, he stared at me intensely, his eyes red with anger and something else I couldn't identify, something raw and desperate. Jill, he whispered hoarsely. I didn't know how Emma learned about Marcus regaining consciousness so quickly, nor did I care about her emotional display of grievance and devotion. My eyes met Marcus's gaze, which had been fixed intensely on me since I entered the sterile room. I turned to the doctor standing nearby professionally and asked directly, when can he be discharged? The doctor carefully explained, Mr. Bennett has just woken up. He needs to stay for observation and rehabilitation for at least several weeks. If there's anything urgent. I smiled politely and interrupted, nothing urgent, just need to get a divorce. As soon as I finished speaking, I heard a sharp crash. Marcus had knocked the water glass from Emma's hand violently. Under her incredulous gaze, he stared at me intensely, his eyes red with anger and something else I couldn't quite place. Claire, I've just woken up, and without even asking how I am, you're so desperate to divorce me? You see, men excel at twisting facts. He was the one who had used every means to force me into a divorce. And now he was blaming me for wanting one. Before I could respond, Emma called out in a trembling, confused voice, Marcus? The room fell silent. I calmly glanced at the shattered glass on the floor, ignored Marcus's furious gaze, and turned to leave, dropping one final comment. Let me know when you're discharged so we can proceed with the divorce. I never visited the hospital again after that day, though I heard Emma went there daily. What she did there, I neither knew nor cared about. Unfortunately, every few days, would receive calls from the hospital about Marcus's recovery progress. I wasn't sure if these updates were really necessary for family members, but I didn't want to know. So when they called again, I politely declined. He's an adult. You don't need to inform me about everything. Unless he's dead, please don't call me again. Just before hanging up, I heard the sound of glass shattering and Emma's startled cry. I saw Marcus again 2 months later in the evening. He had been discharged. Since my car was at the car wash, Daniel, who had been working late with me, dropped me off at my apartment building. Just as I watched his car drive away, I heard an angry voice behind me. Claire. The smile froze on my lips as I turned around. It was Marcus. He looked pale and much thinner, his thin shirt billowing in the night wind, his shadow stretching long under the streetlight. I stood still, watching him stride towards me before he coldly demanded, "Where have you two been at this hour?" I couldn't be bothered to engage, frowning as I stepped aside. "Unless it's about the divorce, I don't think we have anything to discuss." I had barely taken 2 steps when he blocked my path. With veins bulging at his temples, he spoke through gritted teeth. "Claire, don't forget, we're not divorced yet." I immediately understood his implication and found it laughably ironic. I couldn't help but smile as I looked up at him gently and asked, "Marcus, that marriage certificate never constrained you before. What makes you think it will constrain me now?" Emma came to find me a month after Marcus was discharged from the hospital. Since Marcus woke up from his coma, his attitude towards Emma had changed completely, so obviously that even the nurses at the hospital could notice his coldness towards her. After being discharged, Marcus used the poor excuse of needing to handle work to avoid meeting her, while showing up every day outside my office building and residential complex because he no longer wanted a divorce. So the first thing Emma said when she found me was, "Claire Adams, you did this on purpose, didn't you? You deliberately got close to that man just to provoke Marcus, to make him want you back." I had just left the restaurant, and her words amused me. Holding a coffee in one hand, I brushed my wavy hair back over my shoulder with the other, looking down at her calmly as I replied, "Yes, exactly what you thought. Claire, I had no interest in hearing her unreasonable accusations." After walking past her into the office building in my heels, I turned to see her trying to follow me in, only to be stopped by security. When the security guard hesitantly asked, "Miss Adams, is she?" I smiled and said, "No one important." I hadn't seen Emma since then, but I heard that after Marcus repeatedly gave her the cold shoulder, Emma finally snapped and told him coldly, "Marcus, you'd better not regret this. I won't give you another chance." Soon after, she started dating a vice president at her company who had shown interest in her. Obviously, Emma's harsh words had no effect on Marcus, as he continued to find various excuses to see me, insisting, "Claire, I won't get divorced." I found it both ironic and laughable. When he was trying everything to force me into a divorce before, he probably never imagined that one day our roles would be reversed and he would be the one saying these words. I even heard him speak to me softly and tenderly after so long. "Claire, can we start over?" He said start over. He wanted me to pretend Emma never appeared, that he had never hurt me, that nothing had happened, and then get back together with him without any grudges, loving him like before. I felt somewhat helpless, more confused, and finally gave him just one response. "How could I ever marry someone like you, Marcus?" This statement must have hit a nerve, as he immediately burst out angrily. "Then who do you want to marry?" That in turn? Then he asked me, "Claire, haven't you had enough of this drama?" Right. When he wanted a divorce to pursue true love, it was justified. But when I wanted a divorce, I was just being dramatic. Actually, since I'd given up on him, I hadn't felt angry for a long time. My career was going well, I had my friends, and life was comfortable. There seemed to be nothing worth getting upset about anymore, until this moment when my emotions were triggered again. Words weren't enough to express my anger. So I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face without hesitation. After the sharp slap, there was complete silence. Marcus's face was turned to one side from the force of the slap. He maintained that position for a while, then worked his jaw, letting out a sneering laugh. "Now we're even for that slap I owed you. Are you satisfied? I know you let him get close to you just to get back at me. Claire, you've achieved your goal. I won't deny that I have feelings for Daniel. The reason is quite simple. Once, when I was troubled by a difficult project, I sat alone on a bench in the square at dusk, lost in thought. Around me, there were sounds of laughter and play, with colorful balloons and bubbles floating about, but none of it seemed to matter to me. It was in that moment when a person in a teddy bear costume holding a balloon made their way through the crowd to stand beside me and tied the balloon to my wrist. Then they performed a silly bunny dance. To be honest, it wasn't particularly well executed, but it made me laugh. I leaned back slightly and looked at him teasingly. Dancing like a rabbit while wearing a bear costume. Daniel, you're something else. He stepped closer, removed his mascot head to reveal his handsome face, slightly flushed with sweat-dampened temples, but his dark eyes were bright and clear as they fixed upon my face. He said, "What I wear or dance doesn't matter. What matters is that you're smiling, Claire." Indeed, I was smiling. So the reason was that simple: he made me happy. Later, I squinted at him thoughtfully for a moment and asked, "The person in the bear costume I saw before, that was you too, wasn't it?" It was the night when Marcus and I had our first argument about Emma. I was sitting by the window in the coffee shop, feeling miserable, when a person in a bear costume approached and performed a magic trick through the glass. Daniel hadn't joined the company yet then, and I didn't know who was behind the mascot head. I only remember writing, "Thank you," with my lipstick on a napkin, and him looking at me silently for a few seconds before slowly turning and disappearing into the crowd. Not long after that, I heard his self-introduction among the new interns at the company. "Hello, I'm Daniel Cooper." Unlike the previous time, this time after his dance, Daniel removed his mascot head and stood before me, looking at me for a moment before saying softly, "Do you remember me?" I tugged at the balloon on my wrist and blinked. "Of course I remember you." Compared to the intense, intoxicating feelings Marcus gave me, what I feel for Daniel is like a cup of warm water. Not particularly exciting, nor does it make me lose myself. It's calm and gentle. Besides, I won't shut myself off from love just because of one failed relationship. That would give those brief 4 years with Marcus too much importance in my long life. So I don't resist these feelings for Daniel. After all, there's nothing wrong with love itself. It's people who make mistakes. And Marcus was just a mistake I encountered on my life's journey. Once I let go completely. Whatever happens now has nothing to do with him. I wouldn't use genuine feelings to seek revenge. So when Marcus confidently questioned me, I just shook my head slightly and looked at him mockingly. "You think too highly of yourself, Marcus." His face paled instantly at my words. He opened his mouth, his voice slightly trembling and hoarse. "Claire, I know it was all my fault before. I was too obsessed and hurt you, but I've realized my mistake now. I understand that you're the one I truly love, so I won't get divorced." Faced with his obsessive behavior, I smiled faintly, unconcerned. "In that case, Marcus, you can experience what it feels like when the person you love thinks about someone else day and night." The knife he once thrust into my heart had finally turned back on himself. Marcus told me that I was the one he truly loved. To be honest, when I heard those words, I felt nothing. If anything, I wanted to laugh. If I had to be deeply hurt first for him to figure out who he really loved, then this kind of love was nothing but an insult to me. Moreover, this realization only came after Emma deceived and abandoned him, which triggered his regret. After that, Marcus kept pursuing me for quite a while. I neither deliberately avoided him nor angrily told him to get lost. Whether it was late at night outside the office building or at the entrance of the residential complex in the rain, he could stand and wait as long as he wanted. After all, pestering me was the only way he could remain in my life now, even though we were still legally married. When he found me again, he asked, "Claire, you never really loved me that much either, did you?" I wasn't sure what emotions lay behind those words. Looking carefully at his face, I asked him, "Marcus, do you remember that summer, our second year of marriage, one warm evening while we were dining at an outdoor restaurant, we encountered a group of drunk troublemakers? In the chaos, I shielded you from a broken bottle aimed at you. My light summer dress tore, and the blood from my waist wound stained a large portion of your white shirt. When I woke up in the hospital room, I saw you sitting by my bed, disheveled with red-rimmed eyes. Holding my hand, you said hoarsely, 'Claire, please don't do this again. I can't bear to see you hurt.' I gave you a weak smile then and said, 'Don't worry, it doesn't hurt much.' Indeed, it didn't hurt much compared to the pain you would later cause me." We both fell silent as the memory lingered, with only his trembling breath audible. Finally, I sighed resignedly. "Marcus, 4 years ago, no one could compare to you in my heart." After a long pause, he spoke with difficulty, his voice dry. "And now, am I now second to him in your heart? I looked at him earnestly and shook my head. No, Marcus, you're not in my heart at all anymore. Seemingly at his wit's end, he smiled bleakly and tried an emotional appeal. But Claire, you promised grandmother that you'd stay with me. I remained silent, feeling weary. Instead of speaking, I showed him a photo on my phone, a letter from grandmother. The essence of it was that if Marcus didn't treat me well, I shouldn't hesitate to leave him and never look back. I once thought this letter would never be needed. Yet here I was, using it for the second time. The first time, I didn't heed the advice and stayed far too long. The second time was now. Outside, it had started drizzling without my notice. As the gloomy dusk descended, a vein throbbed at Marcus's temple. Without another word, he turned and left. His steps were hurried, his retreating figure defeated. Long ago, I had imagined that when Marcus forced me into divorce, I would look at his polished appearance with pain and hatred and say, Marcus, I will never forgive you. Now that the day has actually come, my emotions are surprisingly calm. When we met at the court, Marcus looked more haggard than before. I heard that after getting caught in heavy rain that day, he developed a high fever and was taken to the hospital by ambulance. Perhaps that car accident had truly taken a significant toll on his health. My friend couldn't help but laugh when telling me over the phone, the after effects of the accident are showing up. Who knows how long he'll last? He betrayed true love with his affair during marriage. He deserves this. I hired the best divorce lawyer and submitted all evidence of Marcus's infidelity. So during the property division, I didn't give up a single penny that was rightfully mine. Marcus remained silent throughout the proceedings. Just before we parted ways, he suddenly spoke, as if asking me or perhaps talking to himself. If Emma hadn't come back then, we could have spent our lives together, couldn't we? If Emma hadn't returned, his deception might never have been exposed. But he would have forever pined for his unattainable love. As time passed, her image in his heart would only have grown more beautiful. Eventually, he would have started reminiscing about Emma during our smallest disagreements, and I would have become the object of his contempt through his silent comparisons. I looked up at the cloudless sky and smiled slightly. Marcus, I wouldn't have been caught in this three-person whirlpool originally. You dragged me into it yourself for your own selfish interests. Life after divorce hasn't changed much. I work normally, socialize, and occasionally take a few days off to travel after completing a project. Except for one thing, Daniel and I became a couple. It happened 3 months after my divorce. At a friend's birthday party, I was getting some fresh air on the terrace when a business partner approached me with a drink, asking politely and gentlemanly, "Remember that classic film we discussed during our collaboration? I recently found the original soundtrack CD. Would you be interested, Miss Adams?" As adults, the implications were clear. I was about to respond with a smile when a voice came from behind him. "Sorry, but I've already called dibs." It was Daniel. He was wearing a clean, crisp black and white tracksuit, his dark short hair making his facial features look sharp yet casual. As he stood there, gazing at me intently, the evening breeze carried the scent of unknown flowers. I broke the silence first, giving a pointed look at the business partner's drink before speaking directly. "I'm sorry, but I only drink water." The rejection was clear, and soon only Daniel and I remained on the terrace. I stood quietly as he took off his track jacket and draped it over my bare-shouldered evening dress. Then I looked up at him with an amused smile and asked, "So, Daniel, what film are we going to watch?" He looked down at me, his eyes sparkling, and replied with utmost sincerity, "We're going to watch Love." Actually, my relationship with Daniel hasn't been filled with dramatic moments or unforgettable scenes, yet every memory feels warm and beautiful. The warm milk he brings me in the morning, the spare hair tie he always carries, the flat shoes he keeps in his car, and how he subtly adjusts my diet a week before my period. Sometimes when I look in the mirror and see him carefully drying my hair, I can't help but remember the first sign I noticed of his feelings for me. It was in that lift when he stood behind me, and I caught his gaze lingering on me through the mirror, a look that wasn't entirely innocent. Daniel has always been mature, independent, and exceptionally capable. In our relationship, his contributions have been visibly more substantial than mine. Besides providing companionship, I feel like I have nothing else to offer. Occasionally, I ask him if he feels it's unfair. He calmly shakes his head, holds me close, and sighs with an inexplicable hint of vulnerability in his voice. I just feel like you might leave at any moment. To be honest, I've been betrayed before. So even though I've developed feelings for him, I still keep one foot out the door, never giving all of my love. After a moment of silence, I can only say, I'm sorry I haven't been able to show you complete love. That's my fault. Hearing this, he smiles with a sense of acceptance and speaks with sincerity. Then I'll just love you a bit more, enough to make our love complete. I don't know how far Daniel and I will go, but as long as being together makes me happy and comfortable, I'll take it one day at a time. We'll stay together if it works, part ways if it doesn't. The important thing is to feel comfortable. That's the lesson I learned from my failed relationship with Marcus. I saw Marcus again 2 years after our divorce at a welcome home party for a friend. I was blocked in the hallway returning from the ladies' room because a crowd had gathered to watch some commotion. Stepping back from the crowd, I intended to see what was happening when I spotted Marcus similarly stuck at the other end of the hallway, quietly watching me before looking away casually. I had just noticed one of the women causing the scene when I froze. It was Emma. Sometimes you can't help but marvel at fate's peculiarity, how it brought the three of us together through an affair and now had us crossing paths again in a similar situation. Emma had married that executive shortly after they got together, but unfortunately, in their second year of marriage, he had an affair. At that moment, I wasn't sure whether to feel sympathy for her repeated experience of being cheated on or satisfaction at her karmic retribution. But I hope that in every painful moment, she remembers that someone else once suffered the same way because of her. Later, as we passed each other in the hallway, Marcus suddenly called my name and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry." I stopped to look at him, unable to decipher his expression, whether it was sadness, guilt, or uncontrollable grief. I had no interest in analyzing it and replied softly, "I won't forgive you, and I hope you're not doing well." He wasn't doing well, apparently. Due to complications from the car accident, he'd been seeking treatment abroad for years, all in vain, with both his physical and mental health deteriorating. He stumbled slightly, and when Daniel called out to me from a distance and started walking over, Marcus quickly turned away. Oddly enough, I noticed his shoulders seemed hunched and trembling, though silently. On the way home, tired and not wanting to talk, I quietly scrolled through Daniel's phone aimlessly. He probably thought I was upset from seeing Marcus and remembering the unpleasant past. So while keeping one hand on the steering wheel, he gently held my hand with the other and said softly, "I'm sorry I was late." At that moment, I accidentally came across an old photo in his gallery from years ago. The person in it was me. In my 3rd year at university, I had tutored a high school student in French. His parents were divorced, and he lived with his mother who was too busy with her career to show him any affection beyond academic matters. He needed French tutoring, but it was really just poor performance to get his mother's attention. My role was less about being a tutor and more about being there for him. On our last lesson, which was his birthday, I didn't know what he liked, so I bought an orange-flavored cake. He barely ate any, and I thought he didn't like it. But when we said goodbye after the lesson, he solemnly told me, "I really liked it." That student was Daniel. The photo was one he had secretly taken of me eating cake with his phone propped against a textbook. Actually, I recognized him the moment I saw him at the company. But what surprised me was that he not only took that photo secretly but kept it for so long. My heart fluttered, and I wasn't sure if his "I was late" meant he should have come to get me sooner, or that he should have found me before Marcus hurt me. But it doesn't matter. I squeezed his hand back and smiled at him. Not late at all, just perfect timing. The night breeze was cool, the moonlight gentle, and my love was by my side. Everything was just perfect.